talking today with Mr. George DeBaar of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. And Mr. DeBaar, can you begin by giving us a little bit of background? Where were you born, for instance?
I was born in the southeast end of Grand Rapids on Ewing Street, which is just south of Hall and Kalamazoo.
All right.
And
And when were you born?
In 4/13/23.
All right. Now, what did your father do for a living?
My father was a huckster. That's where they had produce on vehicles. When he started out, he had a horse and wagon, and then they'd go have a neighborhood and go to these neighborhoods, and they would shout out they were there, and then ladies would come out to the wagon and pick out their produce for the day or for the week.
And how long did he do that? Was he doing it all through the 30s, or did he have to find other work?
He did that, gosh, probably to the, gosh, I really don't know exactly. He had to add to it eventually because the retail markets came in, and so yeah, I don't remember exactly when he finished that. But.
Well, do you remember him doing other work while you were still in school, before you went off to the Army?
Well, he had a trash route that he did, and we also went to different coal companies, and he'd take his stuff off in the truck and stuff, and he'd haul coal to supplement his income. And that was through the Depression in '29, and they had just built a new house in 1927, and then the Depression in '29 and the crash, and they saved it.
So they managed to keep the house?
Yeah. My mother was a great manager, and so yeah, they saved her.
Okay. Now, how many kids were in the family?
There was well, my mother was married before, and she was 7 months pregnant when her husband passed on in the flu epidemic. And my dad lost his wife in the flu epidemic, and they married, and it must have been around in 1918, something like that, because they married in 1920,
right?
And I was born in 1923. So I had a brother from my dad's side, and I had a brother from my mother's side. So it's your kid and my kid are fighting with our kid.
All right. Must have been interesting at times. Okay. Now, did you finish high school?
No, I didn't.
How long did you stay in school?
I was, probably in the 10th grade or so.
Okay. And then why did you leave? Just to go work, or you were tired of school, or?
I guess probably tired of school. I went back and finished my high school afterwards, after the service.
Right. So what did you do then after you left school?
I went to work for Michigan Bakery. I worked on the corner of Wealthy and Division, where Michigan Bakery was, and I worked in there loading trucks and so forth. And,
okay. Now, while you're doing this, you're a teenager, you're out of school. Before Pearl Harbor, did you pay any attention to what was going on in the world, or did the world just kind of consist of your own life at that point?
I guess just consisted of my own life.
Yeah. So you weren't really thinking about getting into a war or anything like that?
No.
Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Over the radio, very likely. And there wasn't we didn't have television at that time.
Oh.
And then all we knew was radios.
And when the news came out, how did the people you know react to it? Did your friends start joining the Army or that kind of thing?
Some of them did, yes. My dad just said, take things, don't volunteer for anything, take it as they come, but don't back out for anything you get assigned to. And
So the idea was maybe wait until you get drafted,
Yeah.
but when you get drafted, then you go.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So when did you get drafted?
I got drafted in January of '43,
Mm-hmm.
and I was inducted in January 15. Well, I was originally went in January 8 of '43,
Mm-hmm.
and I left from home and signed up in Battle Creek
Mm-hmm.
January 15.
Okay. So you went to Fort Custer then?
Fort Custer, yes.
All right. Now, where did they send you from there?
From there, they tell you nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a secret. But we had our clothing issues, and we got an overcoat. All of us were thinking, well, this is in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and we were thinking, well, man, this would be nice. We go to some warm climate. But we got overcoat, and somebody said, well, everybody gets an overcoat. But then we got on the train, still didn't know where we were going, and the train took off, and we headed north,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody was, at that time, everybody was guessing where we were going. We had no idea. And until we reached way up north, we got on the ferry to cross the channel there and then somebody made the statement, well, there's only one place. There's a place at Fort Brady up in Sault Ste. Marie.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're headed.
And of course, this is before there was a bridge across the
Yes,
Mackinac
before
Straits.
there was
Yeah.
a bridge,
Yeah.
yes. Everything was ferry. They had these big ferries. They'd load railroad cars,
Mhm.
trucks, everything on them. And
So you go to Fort Brady then. Now, what did that look like when you got there?
cold.
All right.
It was a real cold, snowy spot. We thought we had winters here
Mhm.
until we got up there. Then they had real winters. And
And is this where you did your basic training then?
that's where we did our basic training. We did our basic training, plus we guarded the Soo Locks and the Canadian locks in between
Mm-hmm.
training.
All right. Now, what did your basic training consist of? What did they have you do?
Oh, physically, I mean, get our bodies in shape.
Mm-hmm.
We had calisthenics every morning. I mean, we'd lay on the. We had to have that every morning, and then you'd lay on your back, and then bring your feet up, and then we had a lieutenant there. He'd get your feet about 3 inches off the ground. And he'd say, "Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it," like you couldn't hold it anymore. And then about a few days, boy, those old stomach muscles just start aching.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, in the long run, it was great for us.
Now, were you doing these exercises indoors or outdoors?
Indoors.
They had a gym or something?
Yeah, they had a gym. Yeah.
Right.
Until the weather broke and we had warm weather, then we'd go outside, and then we did also, running with your rifles and falling. They teach you how to fall, and you put all the weight on the butt of the gun, and break the fall. And
Okay. Was there a lot of emphasis on discipline?
absolutely, terrible. Different from today.
Mm-hmm.
Much different.
So how did they treat you? How did the drill sergeants treat you, recruits?
We were treated well, but they were stern, and I'm sure it isn't like today. I mean, they taught you respect. I mean, you had to respect everything above you, and the flag and the officers and everything.
So you had to know how to salute and who to salute
That's
and
right.
that kind of thing?
That's right. You saluted every officer that you passed, and so forth.
Now, did you have any problems with the discipline? Did you get into trouble or sent off to KP or things like that?
Yeah, that's hard to remember. I imagine I did, but yeah, not anything that I can think of, or anything serious.
Mm-hmm. Now, did most people seem to adjust to the discipline pretty well? I mean, they learned how to be a soldier pretty quickly, and
Yeah, most generally speaking, yes. There was exceptions to everyone. When you take a group of guys out of civilian life and mix them into Army life, you get all kinds.
And do you remember any cases of people who got into real trouble with the sergeants or the officers, or who just didn't adjust well?
Well, just before we were to ship out to go overseas, a couple of guys out of the company held up the, I don't know, it was a theater. They held up the theater, and they thought, we were shipping out the next day, but it didn't work. Everybody had to parade between these, in front of these people that were held up, and they picked them out. Those guys got sent out.
They went into a theater and pointed guns at people or something?
I don't know what they did, but I know they held them up. And yeah, it's just like college, I guess. Kids get freedom, get away from their parents, and well, you take young guys from their teens, early 20s, and fortunately, we went into an established company, an older company. We had older guys, and they mixed us younger guys in with them.
So now, when did that happen? Was that at Fort Brady? Or?
At Fort Brady, yes.
Okay.
I think it originally was the 131st Infantry that we went into.
Right.
And then sometime along the way, we switched over to the 156th Infantry.
Okay. And then were you a particular company of the 156th? Were you the
Company F.
Company F.
Company F, the 156th Infantry.
All right. Now, how long were you at Fort Brady, do you think?
We left in August of 43 for overseas. We went to New York, and we were in a quarantine outfit there in New York. And then on September 5th, 1943, we shipped out.
Okay. Now, let's back up a little bit again. At Fort Brady, you had basic training. Did you get any specialized training there? Were you trained for any particular job?
Well, when we were at the Locks, we were kind of a showcase, shoes shine, buttons shine. People would see you, and you were supposed to stand out as an example to the rest of the world. And we stood on the Soo Locks as the ships would come through. They'd be going both ways.
But did you get any particular training for any particular type of job?
Just that we were guards. We had to have orders for each individual post. There was special orders for that particular post.
But you were not officially military policemen or anything like that?
No, we were not.
You were just ordinary soldiers who had these assignments?
Just ordinary soldiers, yes.
Okay. All right. Now, what kind of ship did they put you on to cross the Atlantic?
We went on the USS Alexander.
And what was that?
That was a troop ship. And September 5th, at that time, it was one of the biggest convoys that they had sent across. And I remember when we passed in front of the Statue of Liberty, a bunch of us guys would say, well, we'll probably never see that again. Which we didn't. We came back through Boston. But anyway, then we were out. It was a big convoy, and then we hit a storm, and also I think there was torpedo boats around us because they were dropping depth charges. Well, anyway, our ship, the USS Alexander, sprung a leak, and as we were traveling along this storm, it was pretty rough. In fact, we had lost 3 men overboard. You say, how could it happen? Well, they grabbed onto something to hold on to on the ship, and that let loose, and they hung on to it and went over with it or whatever. I remember myself seeing one guy out there, and you're just going away, and he's out there bobbing in the ocean. But of course, there's other ships behind you they're not all right in line, but
Well, was the storm during the day or at night?
this was in the day.
Okay, so you could see something, and
Oh, yeah,
maybe he gets rescued.
Yeah, because I remember seeing the battle wagon we had off next to us. You'd see it, and then it would go right through the water. The waves would just run right over the top of this ship. You'd see it, and it would be gone. And the ocean would swell, man, and just big holes in the ocean. And then all of a sudden you'd be up high,
Yep.
and then you'd be down. Well, anyway, as we were going, we sprung this leak. We had funeral services on the ship for these 3 guys that went overboard. And so anyway, as we were going along that night, as it got dark, our ship, they sent us to, broke away from the convoy, and we went on to Halifax, Nova Scotia to dry dock.
Right.
And there we hit dry dock, and then we got on the Queen, I think it was the Queen Elizabeth.
It's either the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen Mary, and they were using them both. Yeah.
We went on, I think the one we went on was the Queen Elizabeth, and we were on there with a lot of Canadians. And the ship was really loaded. Well, anyway, we boarded that, and we started out. I don't know how long we stayed there. Probably not long. With time for us to load up on the ship.
Right.
And then we headed out all alone on the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, and we headed out all alone. And then that ship would switch directions every 7 minutes.
Right.
I think we started out with fighter planes along watching over us, and where they can see in the water, whether submarines or anything are around. But then we everything went well, and we landed in Glasgow, Scotland.
All right. And what happened when you got there? What do you do when you get to Glasgow?
We just well, we got on the train. As far as I know, we got off there and got on a train, and then the train took us all the way across England to the southern coast. We went to Ilfracombe, England. I think that's on the southern coast. I had a map out here, someplace I mapped it out. But that's when we got there, then we start training for D-Day. We rode around in these LCIs, I think they are, landing craft, 28 men.
Okay, those are probably LCVPs, which are the little boats, the Higgins boats.
They're
with the
28 with the front goes down, and
front
then
goes down,
you're trained to, you get to the end, you go off to the right side or the left side, depending. You go single file down the side, and then
if you're going down the side of a craft, that's a larger craft. That would be an LCI that had sort of stairs along the side.
No,
the LCVP had a ramp that just went down the front.
There were only 28 men on it.
Yeah, that's the
and then you
LCVP.
had bags, because you're tossing around in that ocean, that throws that little thing around. Anyway, we did experimenting there, landing. We did both landing with the craft and defending the beaches. We took our turn of.
And what kind of weapon were you issued?
Well,
Did you just have a rifle or something else?
M3. It was M3. Yeah.
Was that a carbine rather than a rifle, or?
A rifle. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the M1 was the standard rifle.
Well, that's it. M1. M1 was the standard. Yeah.
Okay. So
that was my issue. Most everybody. Well, we were in a rifle platoon. We were. Then the other ones, they had BARs, submachine guns, or machine guns, and
mortars.
Right. Yeah, and flamethrowers.
Now, when you were doing these practice landings and so forth, were there ever any large accidents or problems or things that happened?
Oh yes. One particular time we had a group of us down in the valley, and then they would shoot enemy rifles and ours over the top of us, so we could tell the sound of the bullets. And one of the fellows that was in charge up above had a machine gun on a tripod, and you're supposed to just fire a few volleys and then set your tripod up.
Mm-hmm.
And he just pulled the trigger and went right down and got 13 guys
Wow.
in this. I think 5 of them of the 13 died.
Mm-hmm.
But those are parts of training.
Mm-hmm.
And there's accidents in training.
All right.
It's for real.
Do you think you had any either officers or non-coms with your unit who had any actual combat experience at that point, or were they all probably new?
I would say they were all practically
Yeah.
new. Yeah, it was new to them.
Because it was late 43, so you were only landing in North Africa even at the end of 42 and so forth. So there wouldn't be that many available at that point.
No, I think they were in the same. Outside, they probably had more training because we went into an older company.
Right.
And so they had that much more experience. And
Okay. Now, while you were based in England there, did you get a chance to kind of get off base and go into London or into the local village or anything like that?
we trained in Ilfracombe, England, for D-Day and everything. And then we were recommended, because we had pulled guard duty. General Omar Bradley was setting up First Army headquarters in London. I think it was either Lancaster Gate or Marble Arch, London, one of the two. Now, we lived in Lancaster. Well, then they shipped us to London, at Lancaster Gate is where our barracks were.
Right.
And then we went with General Omar Bradley, where the invasion plans were being drawn up. And that was a big building, and that was really tight security. Some of the guards were locked right in a room, and so that was, I think there was 9 buildings all the time, all together, and and then the CIA was same as the FBI and in the Army, it was CIA, and they would check on us. Well, during war in these lands, all your windows are boarded up or they're drapes. There's no light, and then they would check on us. And at one particular time, I had a roving post of 3 buildings, I think, and then these guys would get in somehow or other. I don't know how they'd get into our territory. They were just checking us out, see if we were doing a good job. And then you'd come to a room, and then the drapes were blowing out, and you knew something was wrong. So they'd time how long it took, I'm sure, before you got the officer or the guard or something like that there to check what was wrong. And then they'd find an open window, and then you go on. They would right away put everything into that. And then you find another door where the guy went out. How he got in, I'm sure they had that all prearranged to check to see how good your guard really was.
All right. Now, did they do this kind of thing all the time? Was this
quite
constant?
frequently? Yeah.
Okay. So the whole time you were based in London, they were doing that?
Periodically, not constantly, but they checked your guard to make sure that you were doing what you were supposed to do. That nobody was going to get in there and find out what was going on in there.
Now, did you learn to recognize a lot of the generals and the top brass as they came and went?
Oh yes. I had another post one time right outside of a room. Wherever they came, they went to the bathroom or went to get a drink of water. If they would go down the hallway, when they came back, you had to check their pass before they could go in. And I always remember General Bradley. He was always a real fine gentleman. He never gave you any problem. Where some of the younger officers or lower grade, they didn't like it. They know that you just saw them walk down and come back. But he'd always have his pass out ready. He kind of impressed me as being an all right guy.
All right. Are there other individuals that you remember particularly out of that group? You remember Bradley. Who else came through that made an impression on you one way or another?
No, I can't say anybody else that I No, you just see all different ranks
Mm-hmm.
of officers coming out of there where something was going on in regards to D-Day.
Right. Were there British officers coming in and out too?
Yes, yes.
All right. And did they behave any differently from the Americans?
No, they all knew that if they went in that room, they had to show the guard their identification.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what did you do when you were off duty?
We just went out and had a good time. Yeah, just normal, like you. I guess like you were back home. I guess.
Because you were in London, so there was a lot to do. Right?
Oh yeah, there was a lot to do. Yeah.
Now, did you figure that this was just going to be your assignment now? You'd be headquarters guards and not have
No.
anything else? Or?
No, we knew that we were there on a temporary basis because they were waiting for an MP unit to come from the States
Right.
to relieve us, and then we would go back to our back to Ilfracombe.
Okay.
So finally, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Finally, the MPs came. It took forever for them, and then we were getting ready to ship back to our outfit in Ilfracombe, England, and at that time, Ike was coming from Africa, and he needed a guard unit at his office.
Right.
I can't think of the name of the park. Well, we lived in Bushy Park when we were transferred over there, but I can't think of the name of that other park. But anyway, we went with his office, and we were with that for some time until he established, I think, from when he moved out of England to France.
Right.
That I think it was Reims, France.
Yes, that was where he went. Yeah.
Is that where? No, you're ahead of me. You're
Hey,
you're checking me out.
Oh, yeah, that's-
we went
that's why I
to
have an
Reims.
historian here.
We went to Reims, France, and then he had a place there in Reims, France. And I know that we had a nice building, but we had to walk. I don't know how many blocks to our mess hall. But yeah, we were in Reims, France for quite a while, and then I was just trying. Also in France, we were in Saint Germain, France. That's well. I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, I guess that's when we went with Ike when he went
Right.
to his home in Reims, and then we were transferred from the office to his home, and I don't know how many of us there were.
So did they not take the full company then? Did you have a smaller group from your company who went around?
Yeah,
with
we
you?
were in platoons. Now this fella on the west side, he was in a different platoon, and they were also with Ike, but they were in a different situation, different place, because they were moving, and they'd have to have units ahead to take over a place that they were going to be at, and
Right.
see if that was all established.
Okay. Now let's go back in the story again. Let's go back to England. When did you actually move to London? When did you leave Ilfracombe and go into London? When do you think that might have been?
That's well, it must have been. Well, we shipped out in excuse me, in September.
And then you were there long enough to do some
We
practice
did our
exercises.
training, yeah. So that's probably close to the end of the year or thereabouts.
Okay.
Well, when did I come from Africa?
Somewhere around January or so, or maybe
Okay.
February. Because he was in Africa, and they were in Italy and Sicily by then, and so forth, because they were fighting in Italy in the winter of 43, 44. and he was still supervising it. And at some point, they move him out and bring him up, probably around the start of 1944.
Okay.
So
yeah.
right around then.
So I would say, yeah. Well, we were there long enough to. We were quite a while, quite a few months, with General Omar Bradley, and then we went with Ike in his office. And then we moved to. When he started got a house in France, and.
Okay. Well, while you were back in London still, what condition was the city in? Could you see evidence of the bombing or?
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of thing?
definitely. The Luftwaffe would come about every night, and then you had to go into air raid shelters.
Right.
Not necessarily for bombs, but for shrapnel. And Hyde Park is where they had all the anti-aircraft guns, and I think mostly they were operated by women from the women in the British.
Right.
And well, anyway, that was a sight to be seen. You know, they'd be firing up at these planes up there. You couldn't see them. You couldn't see them, but you could hear them. It would be at night, usually at night when they would hit.
Right.
And regardless of where you were, if you were outside, you had to go in the air raid shelter because when they'd fire these anti-aircraft guns, you know, they get up so high and they explode, and it would just be like taking a shovel full of hot coals and firing that out there. And those law of gravities, that's got to come down.
Yep.
And they're all different sized pieces that come down, and they make a lot of racket.
Yep.
Some do, some don't, but you can hear them when they hit. And
so in a way, much of the danger was really from the anti-aircraft fire,
Yes.
because the Germans didn't send that many aircraft at any given time. They just didn't have that many.
No.
Did they also send buzz bombs?
Oh yeah, that was coming later. They were terrible, the buzz bombs. I remember the first buzz bomb. We were in Bushy Park at that time. I mean, just came out from breakfast, and it sounded like a fighter plane diving on us. It was just, and as it was getting closer, we didn't know what it was. It just sounded like a fighter plane diving.
Right.
And it was a buzz bomb, and then you could see them as far as you could see the eye, and then if they passed you over, you saw that big glow in the back of it, and then when it stopped, you didn't know whether it was going to go straight down, to the right, to the left, where they were going. They were morale breakers actually, and but they were terrible. They'd send those things 24 hours a day, and our RCO, he wouldn't. When we were out in the field, you had to get in a slit trench in order to. If one came over, you could be sound asleep, but we get one coming, or you had to get up, get your helmet and stuff on and all that stuff, and get in a slit trench. Well, if you pressured your life, I guess. You know, you didn't like your CO at first, probably, but then you got to think about it. He had you trained well, and then you start thinking different about it.
Now, did any of them ever hit very close to where you were? Could you see their effects?
Yeah, I had when we were in Ike's office, we had a patrol. There was a wax billet, all wax there, and we had a walking patrol, and then we'd walk these patrols, and then another one guy would go to the right, and then we'd come back and meet, and then go on again. And they had an air raid, and you could hear it, and hear it coming, and well, some of them went off, but there was a pretty good sized one that hit, and it was a dud. That never went off. In fact, they dug it up later on. But also they got smart. They sent baskets of phosphorus bombs. I think they were phosphorus. They burn.
Yeah.
And they I know they hit a lot of the wax barracks and they started them on fire. Well, then you couldn't put these things out, but I guess they found out that they could put water on them and they burned quicker or something or other. But anyway, then they start every so often, they'd put a bomb or an explosive. They'd come in baskets and they'd break apart. And so they'd start more fires and stuff. And then they found out, that you were kind of handling these situations. Then they start putting explosives in every swing. Is that true? You've heard that?
Well, they used incendiaries, and both sides did it. They would try to come up with different combinations of explosives and ordnances and things that could frustrate the efforts of people to put them out. And the Germans knew that the British were pretty good with dealing with disposing of bombs and firefighting and things, so they kept trying to come up with new ways to do that sort of thing. So yeah, that's quite likely to have happened that way.
Yeah, and as far as bombs, I've never had one really close where I'd hit by the explosion or anything like that. But you could hear them go off in a distance or so. But this big one, I know it sat there for a long time. They finally they probably started on it right away, tried to disassemble it or take the firing pin out of it.
Right.
And it was a pretty good sized one. That was in the park also.
Okay. Now, are there other aspects of life in London or things that happened while you were based there, either with Bradley or with Eisenhower, that tend to sort of stick out in your memory?
In London, no. We at that time we didn't see Ike as often as we did when we took care of guarded his home. Then we saw him more frequently.
Okay. Now, when did they move you to France? When did you go over the Channel, do you think? Was it after Paris was liberated or before that? Or when you went, did you go straight to France, or did you go someplace else first?
We went. Well, no, that's right. We didn't go. Well, we landed. As I remember, after D-Day, I think we landed about D20 plus 20, and we came up through with the English through Juneau, Cairns, Bayeux, up through there. They were having an awful time. The Germans would push the English, and then the Canadians had to come in and help the English and push them back again. But the minute the Canadians would back off, the Germans would be running the English back. So they had quite a struggle through there. And then going through Bayeux, I think if you stood on top of a 2-story building, you could see the whole city. I mean, it was just demolished. And
it was Bayeux. That would be the Bayeux, the old Norman town there that the British liberated pretty quickly. Caen, they were still fighting over, and they would fight over that through July pretty much. They were still fighting there, but Bayeux they took right away. Now, did Eisenhower have a headquarters of some kind that you worked at there in Bayeux or somewhere around there?
We had, when we hit on, I don't want to, trying to keep this lined up. I know that when we hit, I would say about D20, then we got in, we came up over the beaches, and then the hedgerows. And then our first night out, we got in a hedgerow, and we had pup tents. So each soldier carries a half of your pup tent. You got to pair up with somebody, and you put your tents, your halves together, and you got a place to. And I remember that night we were bunking in this hedgerow, and it got dark, and then the Luftwaffe came over about 11 o'clock again, and unbeknownst to us, in camouflage, all of a sudden our tents just shook like blazes. I mean, they were just like they were in a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out, right on one of the other side of the hedgerow, we had a anti-aircraft gun.
Oh.
And they cranked that baby up after for that, and that had to be a good sized shell. I don't remember at the time. We're going back 63 years.
But a big gun might be a 90 millimeter, something, a big long gun.
Yeah.
But if it didn't have a rapid fire or whatever, that's what it was.
No, but I think about every fifth bullet was a tracer, so you could see.
Well, that was probably smaller than the 20 millimeter or 40 millimeter, something like that.
No, this was big. This had real compression to it. Boy, those old tents just weighed. And here you are, you're in enemy territory, just across the channel, and your first night out, and you wonder where you are.
Yep.
And it was, of course, the only thing is, you're young. You're probably about 20 years old, and you don't have a lot of fear. You do. I mean, you respect your life, but and you got a lot of other guys in the same boat with you. I mean, it gives you support. So
you have your first night there. You're in pup tents. Did you move into regular quarters pretty soon? Did you get to go into?
Oh no, we went quite a ways through the farmlands and stuff.
So once you crossed over the channel, then did you stay in Normandy? You didn't go back to London again? You stayed
we
in France.
Kept right on going. We were in France, and we stayed right in France. I can't tell you exactly where we ended up first.
Because they used a couple of towns. There was one called Grandcamp-les-Bains, which was near Omaha Beach, and that was one place that some of the headquarters units were. And there was a place called Granville, which was over on the Cotentin Peninsula farther west. So they had different headquarters that you might have been at different times. But you were basically behind the lines. You were still serving as guards for headquarters.
Yeah, we were behind the line. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes not far enough.
Did you ever come under artillery bombardment or just air attack?
No, just air attack. No, I never had any. I think some of our company did. Like I said, they split in different areas. But no, myself, no. About the only thing that I had to put up with is air raids and buzz bombs until they came out with the V2. Of course, that was a different ballgame. You would never know if you got hit with that.
Yeah. Now, when you were there in the French countryside, did you see anything of the civilian population? Were there people around?
Oh yeah, no, like we went through farmlands and we were really we were welcomed, and you're trying to converse with the French. They can't speak English and you can't speak French. That's when you wish you would have taken French in school, but you didn't. But yeah, they were. I remember one place that we went. The family came out and greeted us, and some of the guys had a little wine and so forth, and yeah, they were really happy to see us.
Could you tell how well they were doing? I mean, did they not have a lot of food, or were there other buildings damaged or things like that?
No. I do remember one thing, that one of the guys made connections with somebody. We got eggs for cigarettes, I guess. We were trading cigarettes for eggs, and then we took our mess kits and we had I don't remember how we ate it, but we'd fry eggs in those mess kits, and boy, we thought we had the world by the tail. We had fresh eggs. Otherwise, in the service, you had powdered eggs.
So you didn't get good food just because you were working for headquarters. You just got the regular Army food most of the time?
Yeah. Well, after I'd been with Ike, after I got in his house, then I knew his cooks and stuff like that. That made a difference.
All right. So initially, you're in Normandy and you're mostly kind of camping out in the countryside and so forth. Now, do things change? Because at a certain point, the Americans break out from Normandy. They start heading out cross country and toward Paris and all of that. Did you follow close behind them, or did you hang back further?
No, we stayed with the English pretty much all the way.
Okay. And let's see. Now, your from Normandy, did you go directly to Reims, or did you stop someplace else first? Was there another base before you kind of went to that main headquarters?
No, I can't remember that particular part.
Because you did mention a town, Saint-Germain, or Saint-Germain.
Oh, Saint Germain, yeah. Well, that was after Reims, I believe.
Okay.
Because we went to, well, when we were in Saint Germain, and we lost, that was during the breakthrough of the Bulge.
Okay.
And that's when Ike disappeared from us.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an impersonator for 2 weeks. And this guy went right about his same routine.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the CIA meet with us every day. We had 33 days of guard duty, real intense guard duty. And the CIA would meet with us and tell us what they had known about.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they were dropping parachutes with materials and stuff like motorcycles and stuff, everything, so they could get around the country. And they would find these things.
Were the Germans dropping motorcycles?
Yes,
or?
yeah.
All right.
Well, this was I think they said this was the same outfit that got Mussolini.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Scorzini's commandos, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, same. And so we had it pretty hot there for a while. That was when we were in Saint Germain.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I said, somebody was personating him. And then after 2 weeks, we moved from Saint Germain to Versailles, France.
Right.
And that's where we met up with Ike again. And that's when I had original, well, in Saint Germain I had main gate because I guess because of being tall. And when I got in Versailles, I still had main gate. And then as time went on, it wasn't long, I went inside. He'd go to bed, and then I'd be outside his bedroom door.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the whole area was surrounded with guards all around. That was in Versailles.
Now, how did you get assigned to things? Were you just...
I guess I got the main gate because I was tall.
Mm-hmm.
And...
So you look good?
Maybe, I don't know. But I was fortunate. I got to see things, and everybody that would come and visit them, and you check out. Of course, we knew basically who was coming ahead of time, and I mean everything is. So.
Now, do you remember someone like George Patton coming through?
I escorted. Well, I haven't got that far, but towards the end of the war, guys got discharged. Well, I guess it all happened that originally they had guys escorting Ike on motorcycles, and they cracked up those motorcycles on the cobblestones, and so they had to have, these guys ended up in the hospital, and they had to have something right away, so they took our company, and they got us 2 Jeeps. And the Jeeps on the right front fender had long horns. I really wasn't fancy on sirens.
Right.
We had a long blast horn on the right front fender, and on the left front fender, a flashing red light. It flashed all the time. We had 2 Jeeps that had to be ready to go, and so then our guys took over those motorcycles, and motorcycle guys' jobs, and start escorting Ike. Well, then when we got over in Germany, then these guys got discharged. That was, like I said, the old company, what we went into. These older guys, they got the better jobs, and so then they start being discharged to go home, and then I got selected to drive escort for Ike, and that was my favorite job. And well, there was a Jeep out in front of Ike, then Ike's car, and then we had a sedan with 4 guys with high-powered rifles behind Ike. In the Jeep, we had submachine guns, and I had a guy ride with me. I drove, and I had a guy. We both had submachine guns. Plus, we had shoulder spit and polish, you know, the straps with the
Right.
45s
Right.
on the side. And so we always had to look nice. And then I drove that Jeep for quite a while, no top and everything. And you go out in front of the general's car, and you guided your speed on how close that general's car would push on the back end of you. The closer he pushed, the faster you. About the best thing those things would do is about 70, 73
Yeah.
miles an hour. And yeah, I had taken a bunch of senators up in some mountains. There was I don't know how many cars, but I had to shift gears of that old Jeep to keep up ahead of those cars. I did that. And one time that Patton was visiting Ike, and he had to go someplace. Of course, we took all our orders from the general's driver. I can't even think of his name right now. Probably you know. You probably if you studied it. Or,
I don't know. They had several, so
yeah.
I don't know.
So well, there was a couple guys. They were his right hand men, and one of them usually did most of the driving, and of course they'd fill in for one another. In fact, one of them said one time, he says, "I never see you wear any rating." He says, "How don't you?" I says, "No, I'm just a PFC." He says, "Man, with the job you got, you should." He says, "You want me to take care of that?" I says, "No, I'm not that far from being discharged." But he says, "I'll take care of that for you." He says, "You should have a higher rank than what you got." So, but like I said, we went into an old company, and there was some issues that we had with, and we had to battle those out until we really got to know each other. And
So the guys who were in the original group kind of treated the newcomers a little bit differently?
Well, you know, yeah, I guess personalities, no matter what, you get a bunch of guys, get a bunch of people together, yeah, there's personality conflicts. It happens.
Now, this fellow had noticed that you stayed at PFC for a long time. In a lot of cases, it was fairly standard procedure to give people promotions and this kind of thing. Were you being overlooked for that, or did your commander just not worry about it?
When I was in Ilfracombe, I was came up for corporal, and I turned it down, and that was unheard of. So the CEO or our captain, he thought, "I'll teach him." So he said, "You got a smart aleck kid there." So what he did, he made me do the same job as a non-commissioned officer,
Right.
but I didn't get. I was too dumb to, frisky kid, and so I didn't get the wages, but I still had to do the same job. He was teaching me a lesson. So then my rank came up every time. The guys would tell me I was up for corporal or for advancement, and every time it would be knocked down. Well, he was getting me. I mean, he had the upper hand. I was too dumb to know the difference. I had to grow up, and so when we had a building in Ilfracombe, and there was, I think, 3 floors, and the non-coms had the middle floor, the better floor, and that's when I wasn't gonna. I came up for promotion then, and I turned it down because we were having a kind of set tube with the non-coms, and I stuck with my buddies. It cost me.
All right. Now, you're moving around to several different places once you're over in Europe. You're in France in several different places, and then in Germany. But while you were in France, did you get much of a chance to go like into Paris or that kind of thing?
I went into Paris. Yeah, I went into Paris. I don't know, probably a couple times into Paris. I was really shocked. I had an eye opener when I got into Paris that they had on the streets. They had urinals right out. Right out in the street, just Well, your from your knees, you could see your feet and your head, and yeah, there's a different culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how did the people in Paris sort of treat the Americans? Were they looking kind of to get their money, or were they friendly, or what did you
I
observe?
think the ones that were after our money more so was the English.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they always had a saying, the Americans were over there. They were overfed, overpaid, and oversucked and over here.
Right.
And I think really, I look at the thing. I think we were treated the best by the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
They were super. I mean, we were really treated good by the Germans.
All right. What do you remember about Paris as it was during the war? Was there much damage there, or a lot of activity in the streets?
Well,
or-
only the highlights. I went under the Eiffel Tower,
Mm-hmm.
and I went by the Arc de Triomphe,
Mm-hmm.
and no, really, I really didn't pay. I guess it never stuck with me, but I do remember being under the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Now, when you were in Versailles, did you kind of go look at the chateau and those things, or did you just stay in a barracks someplace or at headquarters?
we got to move around. We went to where the armistice was signed, and what was for World War One.
Yeah, Treaty of Versailles. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that was nice, and I think I got some pictures of it someplace around here, but I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not very well organized with my pictures and stuff.
All right. Now, so if we're kind of following you around in different places, basically you're in Normandy, and then eventually you move over to Reims, and so you're there. But sometime before the Bulge, or was it when the Bulge started that you moved back to Saint-Germain, or were you already back there? Do you
No,
remember-
we were at Saint Germain there for some time.
Mhm.
We were there for quite a while. In fact, the place we took over was the Germans
Mhm.
had that before us.
Yes, they had.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, General Rundstedt was based in Saint-Germain.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then they had some. I remember also they had some big caves
Yes.
that they were like concrete. And in fact, I got some pictures of it. I befriended a little kid that lived there, and a buddy of mine. Two buddies of mine. We took that little kid out and treated him. But yeah, they had some caves in there, and
Yeah, they had munitions in there and headquarters facilities and all sorts of stuff
Yeah.
in there, kind of because it's in a big bluff overlooking the river.
Yeah.
And I know this because this was all under a high school, and I taught at that high school in 1995. So
Is that
yeah,
right?
weird coincidence. But anyway, so you're at some of these different places now. How was it different in Germany? You're going to Germany at the very end of the war, or right after right when the Germans surrender?
yeah,
or?
because we were. I think when the war ended, we were in Reims, France, and that was when they signed at this little school or some schoolhouse or that the armistice was signed there.
Okay.
That was, I think, in Reims, France, and well, that place in Reims, France. That's where he had a two-stall. Well, it was they had two doors. I don't know. I got some pictures of that place. Anyway, you could run right through with the cars. There was a door on each side, and that was nice. Then he'd come out of his front door, get in the car, and
So this was the house that you were assigned to?
this was where he lived.
Right.
That's where he lived. Then he'd come out in the morning, and he'd say, "Good morning, sir."
Right.
And sometimes he would go a little further and talk, and sometimes he had a lot on his mind. But yeah, it was. I mean, you looked at the situation different today than
Yeah.
you did then. You respected the man and for what he stood for, and what he was, and the responsibility he had. And,
Were there people on his staff that behaved badly or treated the soldiers badly or that kind of thing?
No, well, some of the guys when he'd fly out of town or someplace where he'd leave, and they'd take advantage of it and get into his booze or somebody else's, and they'd have a they'd have a good drink. And, he had a couple guys, black guys that were well, he had a butler or he had a tailor that was with him, and then he had two or three black guys. Well, also, I didn't bring out, I don't know that picture. Ike had his own cow. Did you know that?
Cow. And I did not know he had his own cow.
Where's that?
Well, pictures we can look around for after the interview, because we
okay.
can actually include those in the
Okay,
file.
yeah, he had his own cow, so, and man, I couldn't I was a milk drinker and I hated that powdered milk. And man, I got next to those guys and they saw that I got all of that fresh milk, man. And that was a plus.
Now, did he have someone to milk the cow for him, or did they send
Yeah,
the
we
soldiers?
one of our guys. His name was Kramer. And we called him on cow. He had a special name. It's on that receipt there. Yeah.
All right, now I'm going to hold it because my tape is just about up, so I'm going to stop this here. And
Too long when around here.
Yes, it is.
Alright.
I can't.
okay, well we're taping here again. So
Okay.
so for anyone watching this, if there's a picture of a cow attached to this file somewhere, you'll know that we went and found it. Okay. Now you're talking about sort of life at Eisenhower's house. Now, when you're there, did you get better food, or were you still eating Army food?
No, still eating Army food. Every once in a while you'd get if you were inside the house, you'd get a little extra treat through the boys that were in the kitchen. And
So you make friends with the cooks and
yeah, right.
that kind of thing. Now you mentioned that there were some black soldiers there serving, I guess, as servant. Were they the servants or the cooks, or what were they doing
They
there?
were cooks. Yeah.
Okay.
Ike's cooks.
Okay. Now, did you see much of black servicemen otherwise, or just in
No,
that kind of duty?
No. Oh, out on the street when you were in London or something like that. Yeah, you'd see them, but no. But they were assigned to Ike on his staff.
Okay. Now, did you have any civilian staff working for him too, or was everybody military at that point?
The only ones that gal that drove from him for a while. She was an English, she was. Oh, Kay
Okay, Summersby, yeah.
Kay Summerfield, yeah. She drove in our early with him when we were with the office and stuff like that, and she drove for him.
But she wasn't a civilian either, I don't think. I think she
No,
would-
she
would
was
have been
hooked up with
the-
I think
the British Women's Army
British,
Corps, yeah.
British, yeah. I
Okay.
think she was a British whatever.
Equivalent of a
they are.
whack, whatever they had
Yeah.
for the British, yeah. Which I should know, but don't at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about kind of going into Germany. The war ends, and now did you see, were there Germans who came to France and so forth to sign the papers and so forth? Did you see any of them at that time, or any of the German generals or things like that?
Not speaking. I might have seen them in the car, but not up close.
Okay, so you were just there. The cars were going by, and you
Yeah.
knew these people
Well,
were going in.
they would come to whatever. Yeah. No, I was not. I was not stationed at that time. You know, some of our guys in our company were assigned to that particular station.
Right.
And and you'd get all the news from your guys in the company.
Okay. Now, from there, did you actually, then you went into Germany? Did you go to Berlin, or did you go somewhere else?
We took over one of the Germans. I took over one of the Germans' high officials' train. I don't know whether it was Hitler's or one of the other ones. They had a train, and then we took over that. That was good duty too. We'd get on that train, had our own little compartment, and I didn't know. My friend on the west side, he had gone on more train trips than I did, but I had been on one, and you get your own little compartment, and it was good duty when you're young, you know.
But did you eventually, so you stayed on the train? How long did you
No,
use the
just
train?
on a trip.
Just as a
Like
trip.
I'd go on to go someplace, and so
Okay.
he'd take the train, and he'd
But-
take us along with him.
Right. But did he move his headquarters into Germany? Did he go to Berlin or did he go someplace else?
No, yeah, he had a headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany.
Okay.
And we lived in Bad Homburg. That was a little kind of a resort. He had a home there. It was right close to. Well, we went in. What they do is they go in, a bunch of GIs with an interpreter, and go in and pick a house out they want. They
Right.
just go into these people and tell them, you can take your personal stuff, and we're taking over this house by 6 o'clock tonight, and whatever you can, what you can take personally, okay, but you're out. We're taking your house. And so Ike got some real. In fact, there's one place that he lived close to us. He had a pond out there, and some of the guys in our company, they went and got fish someplace and put fish in that pond so he could fish out there. And but I got pictures of that house too, and his Cadillacs. He had one that was an armored job, and I don't know where they are. We moved from Florida here, and about 5 years ago, and all that stuff. Some of it's still packed up.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that the German people you thought treated you better than any of the others. What kind of relationship or communication did you have with them?
It was a case where you're no fraternizing, you know. And we in Bad Homburg, there was, like a park, and had trails in it, and you'd see a bunch of soldiers walking along, and a couple girls walking along, and there's fraternizing. I mean, wasn't long they were talking and so forth. But yeah, they were. They said they didn't want war either. Yeah.
But you didn't have much real communication with them particularly.
Oh yeah. We talked with them. Well, you weren't supposed to.
Okay.
But,
Well, once the war was over, was there less pressure for that kind of thing? And once the Germans had surrendered?
yeah, this was all after the
Yeah.
war. This was all after the war, because we didn't go to Germany until after the war,
Okay.
and that's when.
But there were still no fraternizing rules in place, and
Oh yeah, no fraternizing. No, it didn't mean anything. You know, you take a bunch of young guys and just normal.
but did you deal at all with shopkeepers or tradesmen or people like that? I mean, would you go into town and buy things or whatever?
Oh, you'd go into the bars and stuff like that. No, at that time, no, we didn't, because there was no fraternizing. You had to do everything on the sly. No.
And was that true the entire time you were in Germany? Did it stay
Yeah,
that
because
way?
I was discharged. I was on my way home on Thanksgiving Day in 1945. In fact, I was on the ocean. We had, in fact, we had rough water on the way back. It was Thanksgiving 45. We were on the ocean. I remember sitting at the table, and your food would slide down to the next guy, and then it would slide back again. And yeah, it was. In fact, I got our menu and everything for our Thanksgiving dinner on the ship. And I think that gives the name of the ship we were on too. I don't know.
Was that a troop ship or a liner, or what was it?
No, I think it was a troop ship. Yeah, it was a lot like the Alexander, just a troop ship.
Right.
The highlight of our trips on ships was the Elizabeth, the Queen.
Yeah. When you were on the Queen Elizabeth, were you on a deck above the waterline, or were you down below it someplace? Or?
Well, we had to share a room. where we had a room for 24 hours,
Right.
and then we were on deck for 24
Mhm.
hours. So the thing was loaded to the hilt. They had to put everybody. They wanted to get people over there in that war zone, and they loaded those babies.
Right, because you already had a full complement of Canadians who would have been filling the
Yeah,
ship anyway,
yeah.
but then they just stuffed you guys in
Yeah, right.
on top of
I think
them.
that's the way it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you were on the Queen Elizabeth, did you have bad weather? I mean, was it?
No,
So you
no,
could
not that I remember. No, of course that was so much bigger than what we were on,
Yeah,
and just no comparison.
yeah. Less likely to be swept overboard.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so.
All right. Now, are there other particular events or things that you remember from being stationed in Europe at one place or another? Either individual people or things that happened that kind of stick out in your memory?
Well, yeah, the bombings and the anti-aircraft guns and the buildings that were just you'd see a bunch of buildings, and then all of a sudden you'd see a bunch of them that had been hit by bombs, and they'd just leave a big crater.
Right. Now, did you see that kind of thing, that kind of damage in Germany when you went through, or did you see any of the German
No,
cities?
not in evidently in Bad Homburg. I think, as I remember, I think it was kind of a resort.
Yeah. Frankfurt would have been hit, but maybe
Yeah.
not the smaller
Well, and I
places.
took over the IG Farben building in Frankfurt.
Mm-hmm. And that would have been a target during the war.
Yeah,
probably.
it would have been. Yeah. Okay, that was I think one of the biggest office buildings in the world at that time. And another thing that set these DPs, displaced persons, we would be at the train station when we had the train, and then these people, they'd run them through there, and they couldn't get out on the streets or anything. They'd just be into these depots and stuff, and they'd have to, just sad, and they'd load these people on boxcars, and that's the way they traveled, those
Now,
poor souls.
where were they from, or where were they going? Were they from Eastern Europe and being sent back, or what was going on?
I don't know. I know that when we got to Paris and talking to the girls and the people there, that the Germans took all the males, the men, and took them out of there and put them in labor camps,
Right.
and left the women to fend for themselves. And
So there might have been some people who were coming from Germany and going back
yeah,
west
well,
somewhere.
you had all these displaced persons, and they just loaded them on boxcars, and it had to be terrible, and just shipped them around.
Yeah. Well, the Germans had moved a lot of people around, a lot of Eastern European people in particular,
Yeah,
to different
yeah,
places
yeah.
to be laborers and that kind of thing. And then there were a lot of people who'd been taken prisoner when they went into the Soviet Union, and a lot of them had to be sent back too. So not all of them wanted to leave where they
Yeah.
were. But for you, they were mostly just a crowd of people that you couldn't tell too much about them, like where they were from or anything else like that.
We didn't. Of course, we didn't chat with them or
Right,
anything.
right.
Different background, different language, and stuff like that.
Yeah. But it wasn't your duty to guard them or anything like that either. You just simply saw
they
them.
were just there to get off in the train, or the train stopped, and probably to use a restroom or something like that. You really had to. People don't know what war is. I mean, the American people don't know what war is. It is hell. I mean, the way people get pushed around.
Right.
There's nobody giving you a break.
Now, did you ever have occasion to go into any of the prison camps or concentration camps? Did you see any of that while you were there?
No. But I will tell you one thing that I remember. I don't remember where it was, that we had areas that we'd take truckloads of guys, and we'd run a good sized area, rope it all off, and then we'd go to a home, and they'd knock on the door, and we usually either had an interpreter or something, and then everybody had to get out of the house. But then one person would go with the guys, and we'd go in the house, and we were looking for knives, guns, and stuff like that. And then we would search with this one person. We would search these houses, and if somebody pulled a drawer and it was locked, you asked the person to unlock it, and if they didn't, you'd smash it. You gave them reason. You mean depend on who was doing it. I mean, what temperament the guy had. Some had no mercy for anybody, and then there's others. But and then we would. Then they had an area closed off where they'd find guns, and then they'd take some of those people. First you ask them if they had any guns or anything, and they said no. Well, maybe they didn't know, but anyway, we did that for quite a bit. Go from homes.
Now, did you find much of anything?
Oh,
Just occasional hunting
well,
piece
there
or
was
something?
a group of guys. No, I don't remember anything highlights that we found, guns or anything. But, you're a bunch of guys out there and a big area, and they have a kind of a place where they not lock people up, but they corral them and they stay there and until they take them to where they are incarcerated.
Now, would these be people who were arrested because they had weapons or things like that, or they were suspected of other activity, or?
Well, whatever. I mean, whatever. Like weapons was the main feature that we were after, and.
Were you worried that some of them were still Nazis and they might be trying to make trouble?
Well, you had no idea really that whether they were or not. I mean, you're in a foreign land. Right. I know another thing that I didn't highlight. When we were in training in England, I don't know whether this will fit in right at the time, but when we were training, we had fixed bayonets, and then from morning till night, our theme was kill or be killed. Kill or be killed. And then we had dummies out there with, then we'd have bayonets. We'd stick them into these dummies, put your foot up, and pull the thing back out, and we had all kinds of training like that. Kill or be killed, kill or be killed, kill or be killed, kill or be killed, from morning till night. They're trying to toughen up a guy right out of civilian life, and he's going to fight for his own life. And then I had hand-to-hand combat training, where they, and then they taught us also to take your thumb, run it in next to the nose, and pull the eyes out, and so forth for hand-to-hand combat. And
makes headquarters duty look pretty good.
So
So you get through all of this, and you get back to the United States, and then they landed you in Boston, I think you said.
Yes.
All right, and then did you get shipped back home to be discharged, or how did that work?
we got as far. I think Chicago was the last place that we had, and we had the thing closest. I lived in Grand Rapids. The closest we could get was a train going to Kalamazoo, and so we took that train to Kalamazoo, and then we rented a cab. There was a guy from up north. I don't know who he was, but he was going north, and then we had. I think there might have been four of us. We split the taxi fare from Kalamazoo to Grand Rapids, and I think he got out. I don't know where he went from here, but we took a taxi from Kalamazoo. I don't remember what it cost us.
All right. So when did you get home?
We got home probably December. Well, we were discharged December 8th of 45, and we probably got home December 10, 11, something like that.
All right.
Yeah.
And now, what did you do when you got home? What was the first thing you did when you got back to Grand Rapids?
Well, we got back. We drove. We had the taxi drop us off at my house, and then my friend on the west side, Bill Civic, he, my uncle and aunt were visiting my folks, and my uncle and my dad, and myself, we drove Bill home over on the west side, and so forth. What really impressed me with Bill, he hadn't been home since. Well, in almost 3 years, and the first place he wanted to go was his church. We dropped him off at his church, and then he said, "Well, I'll get home from here." So I probably have talked to him since. I mean, we meet periodically for lunch, but at the time I don't remember whether, but we dropped him off at the church.
All right. Now, once you got back again. Did you look for a job right away, or what did you do then?
No, I didn't look for a job right away. No. Hell, I'd been gone for 3 years.
And the Army gave you some money when you were discharged?
Yeah.
Or?
I don't remember.
And there was some kind of plan where you could get X number of dollars a week or something like that. Yeah.
And you could have got more money if you wanted to sign up again.
Well, yeah, that too.
I don't remember how much we were. And actually, you could have gone to school, could have taken up flying and all that. I was too dumb to take advantage of it. I had enough, and so anyway, yeah. I've had a good life.
All right. Well, what kind of work did you wind up going into?
I went in electro. I was I worked at Keeler Brass for 39 years, and then I took up the electrical trade, and I ended up being electrical supervisor at Keeler, and retired in 1985. I've been retired 23 years now, better than 23 years.
All right. Well, you're still doing well, and you're still telling a good story. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Okay.
All right. That's a
I
wrap.
hope we covered...